Welcome back and thank you for staying with us on KUTV Primetime News. Time for the discussion. Now, the ongoing conflict in the Eastern DRC, part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, is said to be one of the deadliest conflicts in the world history, having caused approximately 6 million lives since 1996. Now, it's said that the ethnic and geopolitical competition among the DRC, the neighboring communities, and the non-state armed groups fueled the war and conflict. Tonight, we have a sit down with Dr. Wandiri Mwea, who is a lecturer in international relations, conflict and strategic studies, to analytically look at the conflict and the resolutions of the Nairobi peace process that was just concluded today. So thank you so much, Dr. for dedicating your time for this discussion. And now tonight we want to look at the elephant in the house, the conflict in the Eastern DRC, which has been for a very long time been a thorn in the flesh. So the conflict in the Eastern DRC is not something new. It's been there for a very long time and for years. So tell us exactly what could be the cause of this conflict. Is it the politics that is involved in it? Could it be that now that it's a region that is rich in minerals, those are the economic the economic things that are tied probably to this conflict? What exactly is the cause of this conflict in the Eastern DRC?
Thank you, Modi. I would have to mention a few aspects that have been a major contribution to the problem that is in DRC, and we would be looking at the historical foundations of we would be looking at the historical foundations of Congo as a state since 1960, when it became an independent state,
right.
With Joseph Kasavumbu being the president and Patrice Lumumba being the prime minister. And with the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, there was a problem of the coup and counter-coup, and that becomes basically the issue in Congo until the time when Mobutu Sese Seko took over power in 1967, and basically the entire state became extremely volatile because the internal structures of governance became very shaky.
Right.
We would actually say that even when it became an independent state, I think Congo has not been stable at all. You know, the issue of coup and counter-coups makes a state to be extremely fragile.
Sure.
And then, of course, there is a problem of the politics of exclusion, where most of the people within the Eastern DRC feel that they do not belong to Congo.
Right.
I will give an example of the Kenya people, or rather Kenya as a state, where some people in the northern part of Kenya felt like they actually do not belong.
Sure.
Or we would be looking at a situation which was there sometimes back in the coastal region, where they felt that they needed to secede because they felt like they were not well represented.
Right.
In the same breath, we see that has become a serious problem on the eastern part of Congo. And remember, there are quite a number of groupings which include the Tutsi. Tutsi is an ethnic group that is both in Congo and in Rwanda.
Yes.
And because of that, most of the wars that have been fought by the militia group involve, or rather the Tutsis are basically involved, and that's why you hear that the Rwandese, or the Rwanda being involved in this matter, because when the Tutsis are fighting in DRC, then their brothers on the side of Rwanda basically assist in one way or the other.
Right.
So that, of course, becomes very difficult. And then, of course, number three, we see that Congo has a very high population of about 100 million people. Think about it, that it's like more than double the Kenyan population. That, of course, becomes very difficult because on the eastern part of Congo, there is a very high level of militancy, courtesy of the population, which, of course, the government has not been able to deal with. Then we have the fourth problem, which is external factors, where the external actors have been now coming in because of the amount of minerals that there are in Congo. And so all those problems compounded, they have made Congo to be extremely difficult.
All right.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Now, you've mentioned a number of issues that are probably fueling this conflict on the eastern part of the DRC. At some point, of course, you mentioned that the Hutus, the Tutsis rather, who stay in the eastern DRC, and of course, their brothers staying in Rwanda. There have been speculations earlier that the Rwandan government is supporting the war in the eastern part of DRC. Are these allegations true? Because when the Nairobi peace process was started the other day on Monday, we had the East African heads of states committing to work together to ensure that peace prevails on the eastern DRC. And Paul Kagame said that the East African DRC can fully depend on his support in ending this war. And there have been those speculations that the Rwandan government is supporting the war in the eastern DRC. How true do you think these speculations are?
That would be true. Because, of course, these are issues that have been discussed in the yesterdays.
Yes.
And we know that Congo does not the militia groups in Congo are basically so many, and most of them you can tell that they are really not originally from Congo, because we know, like, say, the M23, which is of course a thorn in the flesh on the eastern part of Congo, mainly the Tutsis. Now, most of the Tutsis are in Rwanda.
Right.
And we have seen that they are the ones who are really making it difficult for the government army to stand. That explains that Rwanda cannot be far from it. So there could be quite a lot of truth in that, that Rwanda has got a part to play, and it has played strongly in the conflict that is within the eastern part of Congo. Yes.
All right, and still on that, when this Nairobi peace process was when it began on Monday last week, the heads of states came together, and all of them in their addresses to the communities that were represented on the Nairobi peace process, they committed to working together to ensure that peace, of course, prevails on the eastern part of DRC. And according to the communique that was released today, we are told that 53 armed groups were represented in the negotiation. So the efforts that have been there so far, will they really yield fruits to ensure that peace prevails and we see something like a ceasefire from the armed groups? Because the Luanda Peace Accord also, the resolution that they made was that the armed groups were supposed to be a ceasefire, which has not been seen. Yesterday, a report was released, rather a news was released on the eastern DRC that the M23 rebels had killed more than 200 people on the eastern DRC, meaning that they had not committed to the resolutions made in the Angola Peace Accord. So what we have seen, the Nairobi peace process, could it bring a solution to the perennial issues that have been affecting the eastern DRC?
We could probably be saying that we are on a pathway to peace.
Right.
But it is still far from reach. Why? Because one, there is some measure of commitment from the groups that have been engaging in this process. But again, we know that there are more than 53 groupings or militia groups in Congo. What that means is it is not even half of the group that has been approached, so that now they can engage in this process effectively. Remember, when we talk about the military intervention, that does not necessarily mean that there is going to be peace. What that simply means is this, that when we involve, or rather when a military group is involved, it only means that there can be a temporary ceasefire.
Right.
But what is most important is to make sure that the warlords or the leaders of these militia groups, which could be more than 100, should be brought on board.
Right.
Because these are the people who understand their grievances. We call them the belligerents, or we call them the parties to the conflict. So if they are brought on board on a round table, and then they can air their grievances, it is from that point that then the group that is involved in the peace process can now be able to say, these these are the problems that are ailing us, and this is the best way to go forward. But if we bring half of it, what that means is that even if there would be a peace accord that would be realized, slowly but surely there is going to be a very serious fault line, which again will take quite a long time for it to be mended. So in that case, there is quite a lot to be done.
All right, and maybe just to borrow from the address that was given by the Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni during the launch of the third Nairobi peace process here in Nairobi, he said that the problem ailing the Eastern DRC is that firearms are in the hands of wrong people. That is the non-state armed groups, and he said that what will bring a solution would it's two approaches. One is the diplomatic way, which included, which would include, of course, the different stakeholders, the different groups, the leaders of these armed groups, together with the communities that are involved on the Eastern DRC, brought together to have negotiations. And probably this is what we saw in the Nairobi peace process, in as much as, yes, not all the armed groups were represented here. Only 53 groups were represented. And on the other side, he said that if diplomacy fails, that's where we would see the military way, of course, coming in to probably solve this crisis. And of course, the commitment you have seen from the East African heads of states, we had 2 contingents of military from Kenya being sent to, of course, go and help in restoring peace in the Eastern DRC. So is there a way really that probably if diplomacy fails, the military way, could it also bring a solution to this? Could they have, are they strong enough to build a wall against the more than 120 armed groups that are not owned by the state in the Eastern DRC?
We would first be asking ourselves, who is the enabler when it comes to the proliferation of small arms and light weapons? And in this case, we know that the militia groups do not manufacture the weapons.
Right.
It means that there must be a group of people that becomes an enabler in strengthening the militia to have those weapons consistently.
Right.
And the question is, who are these groupings? Of course, it is the states. And that means that there must be the states that have got the interest in having a part of either the minerals in Congo, and that is why they want to have that problem of militia and militia engagement continue.
Right.
Because we know that militia engagement is an economic venture by other means. And when we do not have the proliferation of small arms and light weapons, that means that even with the conflict, it will not be militarized. The only way to sustain this conflict is to have the arms. Therefore, number one, we need we would be asking ourselves, is there political goodwill from our leaders within the region, so that even when they give, their soldiers to go to Congo so that they can go and keep peace, to what extent are they genuine? Because we know that there are some states which have been amassing a lot of minerals like gold, and yet they do not have the gold mines. The question is, where do they get these minerals from?
Right.
So because of the interest of different states, then it is quite unlikely that we would get to a point where we see that there are no weapons in Congo, because there are those that want that problem to continue so that, of course, they become beneficiaries. Remember, if you do not have a legal status where you can have your way in one way or the other, then, of course, you create chaos.
Right.
Now, those chaos will help you to have your objective, because as the chaos continue, then, of course, you have your way out. And I think this is basically the problem in Congo. In fact, if every African or if every leader within the Eastern Africa region has got the political goodwill to see that problem come to an end, why not?
All right. Really, that is making a lot of sense because from my interaction with, I was actually there with some of these representatives that came from the DRC. And what stand out is just from a side interview that I was having with one of the citizens is that the issue of minerals, makes people he didn't mention names, he didn't give me the name of the states probably, but he said that there are people who are coming in the eastern DRC, meeting the leaders of the rebel groups and committing to supply them constantly with the firearms to ensure that there is war in that region, and what their interest is in the minerals. So if these things are happening in the watch of the states, I mean, the firearms are passing, crossing the borders of different states, getting into the eastern DRC. So could it be that the East African leaders are speaking with double sides of the mouth? They're lacking this political goodwill to ensure that peace prevails in the eastern part of DRC and, of course, in the whole East African region.
Well, while every leader would not basically be subject to accusation, but of course that does not mean that everyone is speaking from the same script.
Right.
Apparently, it's not possible for anyone to stand and declare that they are not interested in seeing the peace prevail.
Right.
But deep down, that can tell you the reason why we say that is because even in the yesteryears, we have seen that some of the conflicts that have prevailed, for example, in Sudan and South Sudan, we know that there were quite a number of groupings that actually did not want to see the war come to an end. Again, we understand that militia groups can be used by different territorial boundaries, so that they can be able to foster their interest. And in that case, that is when the militias are promised that they will be supplied with weaponry. So because the militia are also gaining from it, it is basically like it's a win and win take between the militia and some states. Then of course they will want to see that continue. And the question then again would be, why is it so difficult to call all these militia groups the leaders particularly? Because if you remember the case of Sudan, for example, in 1993, on the onset of the conflict, the peace process beginning between the former president al-Bashir and the late Garan, in 1993 when they were invited to Kenya by the former and the late President Moi, but al-Bashir said that he was not going to engage with the rebel group.
Right.
And he actually refused to meet the SPLA leader, the late John Garan. But with the help of the leader of Eritrea, Djibouti, and Uganda at that time, and even to the extent where they threatened him that, well, if he was not going to engage in this process, then of course they were going to get into his territory and they would fight him. He was now persuaded by the late President Moi that they would make their threats true unless he would comply. It was at that point in Kaparak when President al-Bashir accepted that he was going to engage with Garan. Out of it, of course, slowly but surely, as much as it took quite long from 1993 to 2005, but we see that there was something substantial courtesy of all those members having been allowed to have a roundtable meeting where they discussed the problems that were ailing Sudan and the larger Sudan at the point now where the peace accord was signed in 2005 and then South Sudan today is a state.
Right.
So in the same way, I think we should be able to see that where the EAC is strengthening these talks so that we see the people who are directly affected by the conflict or them that are engaged in this conflict coming to the table, and not a part of them, but all of them, because if we say that we have got, say, for example, 50, the question is, what is happening with the rest?
Right.
Yeah. So I think all of them should be able to be brought on board.
All right, and maybe borrowing from what you said concerning John Garang, we have seen the DRC President Felix Tshisekedi being adamant to have these rebel groups, of course, coming to meet him on a roundtable to express their grievances for them to probably solve this issue diplomatically. Now, is adamant to refuse to, of course, give a roundtable meeting with the other armed groups, probably. So what does this really tell us? Is there really hope that without the diplomacy that which probably, if given priority, would solve this crisis, is there really hope of ending this crisis soon as possible? Because even as noted by the former President Uhuru Kenyatta, saying that so far the resolutions they are made in the Nairobi peace process are short-term solutions. Is there hope that we can have a long-term solution with the kind of leadership we are seeing from Felix Tshisekedi, ultimately refusing to engage in a diplomatic way on a roundtable together with these other armed groups leaders?
Well, his refusal might basically not be a solution. But again, of course, he would be feeling that he is a statesman and that he is a president of a state. But what he also needs to appreciate is that he is feeling threatened, because that is why he has taken the step to come to Kenya so that he can engage in that discussion.
Right.
And we cannot downplay the actions of the militia, because one, think about it this way: they are causing the entire region to be extremely fragile.
Right.
Because as much as Congo has come in with quite a number of benefits in the East Africa Cooperation, namely and not limited to trade, one, because of course the population in Congo is very high. That means that they could be contributing to quite a number of benefits in trade. Number two, you know that Congo is linking the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. That means, of course, there is the benefit of the blue economy in that area.
Right.
And then again, we see that because of the minerals that there are, then that can be a benefit to any East Africa company. If they have got the capacity, then they can be engaged in the extraction of those minerals. Of course, with the legal structures put in place. Now, that said and done, remember there is the flip side of the baggage that Congo has come with. Yes. Because one, we see that there is a problem of the proliferation of small arms and light weapons. That is a big problem, because we are saying that now the region can experience such insecurity as a result. Then two, we know that there is a problem of criminality, and we have said that there are high insurgencies where you notice that there is very high level of militancy, and therefore that would mean that the chances of the militiamen and the criminals moving around because of the the elimination of the tariff barriers within the region now, then it means that the entire population within the East Africa Cooperation can really be threatened.
Right.
Apparently, we have seen in the recent time that even terrorism has found its way in, even with groups like the ISIS. That means that all those are threats. All that said and done, there is now need for the president of Congo to understand that he is now not going to manage Congo alone.
Sure.
Because these people are not going to make it any easy for him. And of course, there is now need to engage in a dialogue. And what that means is that there is need to legitimize the status of this militia, so that they can be assured that they will not be regarded as criminals, and when they engage, they come to the negotiating table, they will now not be subjected to facing legal action.
Right.
In that case, then it is possible for them to discuss effectively, feeling in one way or the other they may be equal partners. Of course, equal in quotes, that they are not seen as criminals, that they are not seen like, like they are not wanted.
Right.
So in that case, they will make very positive contribution. Of course, we may not say that they will be given what they want. That is subject to negotiation. But again, wishing them away and saying you will not discuss with them, that could be a bigger problem.
All right.
Yes.
Now, interestingly, of course, you've also mentioned to us, which would have led to the question that I would have asked next, but you've quite handled that comprehensively. So, as it comes out clearly that really the peace situation in the eastern DRC is not only of importance to the DRC, but is of importance to the entire East African bloc. So in as much as yes, the leaders are trying to ensure that peace prevails in the region, is there a way that for the rest of us, the rest of the countries, that is Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, all the countries that are within the East African bloc can join hands? Is there, I mean, how can they also engage, apart from leaving it to the leaders, to ensure that probably we amass our efforts to ensure that peace also prevails in the Eastern DRC, which of course will bring peace to the entire EAC region?
Well, there are quite a number of avenues that can be explored to see that peace prevails in the region, and particularly in Congo. One, there could be quite a number of strategies that can be put in place. And one is diplomatic engagement, I will say, which would include personality engagement. Personality in this sense that I will take a case of Sudan. When at the point when the conflict was really getting out of hand, there was the intervention of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD. That time, the former late President Moi was the chairperson, and he asked one of the experts, namely the retired General Lazarus Sumbeo, to come on board so that he could begin that process. And of course, Sumbeo did a lot of work because he is a person who was able to travel to quite a number of countries, asking not just for mainly what he was asking for. One is financial help, and two, he also needed to understand what are other structures that can be put in place to see that there was peace. And of course, quite a number of personalities came on board, which included ambassadors and even presidents of quite a number of states. Then when he came now, he was with the strength of every state that was supporting him, either directly or indirectly. He was able to ask that those people who are mainly involved in those conflicts would come on board. And the first person was, of course, Garan. The second person was Al-Bashir. The third person was Osman Ali Taha, who was the first second vice president in Sudan. At one point, he had actually refused to come. But then sanctions would now be put, according to Sumbeu, and finally he showed up. Of course, there were so many other people, and that is why it took quite a long time, although even the financial problem was also there, because at the point when it was beginning, the Kenyan Treasury had to give IGAD about 10 million shillings to be able to start the process.
Right.
So one, we can be called as resource persons in which way? So that we can be able to provide a blueprint on how best should this process be carried out. Because you see, you can see the goodwill of the leaders,
yes,
but again, is the process right? Yeah, so if we say, let's take the military and let every state or let every partner of the EAC bring in military so that they can go to Congo, are we really solving a problem? The answer may not be so, because basically what we are doing is putting a veneer, above very many problems below.
Sure.
So now those issues need to be unearthed so that we can, so that there can be a script detailing what is going to be done and how should that process begin. And this can only be done mainly by experts.
Right.
So with the experts now being strengthened by the state structures, apparently that will work. Yeah.
All right. Dr. I think for the benefit of time, we wrap it up at this point, and that has been so insightful, of course, bringing an academic angle on how we can approach the perennial conflicts in the Eastern DRC. And all we are hoping really that peace prevails in the region, which of course will also mean that we have peace in the entire East African community, and the trade and all the benefits that comes with the DRC joining EAC, of course, shall be enjoyed in the entire region. Thank you so much, Dr. for your input on this.
Thank you, Modi.